Carrie, we all sign this one or just Rick?
Just Rick.
National Crop, that's okay.
Yep, just that one.
These are all set.
All right, being 5 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from May 16th. Everybody have, you just read them now.
Just skimming back, I think I read that one before, I thought they were okay. Yeah, I'm okay with you.
So,
I'll make a motion to approve.
second it.
All in favor? Aye. Now we have to approve the minutes with on May 30th, which that was with A. Maderos on,
I had a hard time reading my, deciphering my shorthand, you know?
Did you send, I hadn't seen this
does everybody have a chance to read that one? Or-
yet. No, this is the first I've seen.
Okay.
I think I captured the essence of it. Remember, I got a lot of dark gray matter up there too, so.
It's tough to take notes like that as things are
Yeah.
going along. I just have two things on that one.
What page?
First page, last paragraph, it was me that asked why he ran, because I remember saying this might be a dumb question.
What
So,
happened?
and me,
Oh, about the hydrants?
no, the one about running a new main instead of copper straight across. I was wondering why he didn't just do service connections to the
Yeah.
buildings.
Okay.
So yeah, that was, and then on the second page, one, two, three, four, like 6 or 7 down,
Mm-hmm.
says stated, put the discussion on the next regular agenda. I had said not on, it wouldn't be on this agenda,
Yeah.
because it was too quick.
I
So
meant that-
I just put a future agenda.
Yeah. When it could be scheduled on a future agenda, because at that time it could make this one.
Right.
You know, see, that's why you guys should vote that I never be secretary again.
Yeah, but then one of us would have had to do it. I think I don't have anything else.
No second on that one?
Well, they might have something else. They can still read it.
I'm good with it with those
You
changes.
good with it?
Yeah.
All right, you're good with it?
Yeah, with those changes, I'm fine.
Okay, so hear a motion to accept this one?
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes with the changes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I signed the last page of this one, so when you make the changes, you can just use the last page.
I'll just sign this one, because I don't know if it's like messed up the pages,
Oh.
with the paragraphs. if you don't mind.
Nope, I'm right. Well, I guess you're up.
All right, well, thanks for having me. Apologize for missing the last one, but I was under quarantine, so we had to reschedule, so I appreciate your patience with me there. So I'll start with the projects that are currently underway, if that makes sense, then we can kind of step through some of the others. So well 5, the well has been installed, the pitless has been installed, the well pump and transducer have been installed. What remains is the electrical work. So Wayne and I have been in discussions with the contractor to try to come out and, I guess, get the electrical engineer to come out and do the main connection and the splice with the cables. I think they're not necessarily avoiding the work, but they know that the VFDs are lead items, so they haven't scheduled that work. So we did touch base with them last week, and they're willing to make that a priority to come out and make that connection. And then the VFDs are still going to be a lead item, seems like they're still several weeks away.
We're gonna be getting into a high usage period soon. Wayne wants to be able to use that station if he can,
Right,
you know, if even it's without the variable speed controller.
And we've communicated that with them, and they seem amenable to making that a priority to come out and do that, so.
Right.
Yeah, we just talked to them at the end of last week, and they're on board.
We still have something we have to run the pumps for a final from DEP, or is that?
So that, yeah, we can qualify it, but if they splice it in, we can qualify it and get through that. That's why I was hoping if they do that, we can get it qualified when the VFDs come in, then once it's all switched over, it'll be ready to go, if not, had to run.
Well 5 is replacement well?
That's right. Yeah. The other project underway is the short term, or we're calling it the immediate term, PFAS treatment at the Manley Street water treatment facility. As you know, we're underway with the design of that, and we recently submitted a letter for consideration. As you may recall, when we did the original correspondence with DEP, we looked at a specific ion exchange resin through Evoqua. They were the ones who come out to the treatment plant, did a tour, and had a proposal that was good for our application. As we were in design, we continued to do our due diligence and made contact with this other company called AdEdge. And in that letter, you'll see their proposal. And what made us evaluate them a little bit closer was the chlorine residual issue. So you might recall from previous discussions, the one thing that made us all nervous is that we can't pass any Myox residual through the ion exchange resin, or it could melt the resin and essentially ruin the work. So we looked at potentially eliminating Myox pre-green sand, and I think Wayne was doing some analysis on how that would impact the treatment for iron manganese at the plant. And if we couldn't get to a point where we could eliminate that, we thought the best thing to do would be to add essentially a dechlorination step between green sand and PFAS, just to avoid any issues where we accidentally melt resin a couple months into what we're hoping is multiple years of life. So in talking to this company, their media is chlorine resistant, so it doesn't have the same issues of melting if we were to carry a small residual through the green sand media. So what we wanted to do is make sure, before we got too excited about it and just said, let's do it, we want to make sure we understood all the pros and cons of both medias. And so that was the point of that letter that we submitted to Wayne and the board, I believe, last week.
Yeah, I think when they designed that green sand filter, it was supposed to have a very low residual, but we're supposed to come out the other end with some, or else, the green sand wasn't working as to its full capability.
Well, we're kind of tiptoeing that line, I think, where we're trying to carry Myox, enough Myox through so that we're getting the oxidation we want in those vessels, but then also that's our main source for residual leaving the treatment plant currently, is my understanding. And so by having to not carry residual into the PFAS, that was, we were looking at already upgrading the the chemical feed system to be able to dose at the end of the treatment plant again. So that's still in there, but with this adage, essentially, instead of us dipping into the contingency and having to put in a dechlorination step, we can eliminate that step, and the media came a little bit cheaper, so even though there's maybe a little bit additional modification to the existing vessel to make it work, it still, we think, has you coming out ahead, just
What
from a-
is the media like? Is it an ion exchange, or how does this one work?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it, to be honest, but Paul Howard really gave us the kind of the once-over, the seal of approval. So I'm not really prepared, I guess, to talk about technically how it works, because I would be giving you just a superficial understanding, and I don't think that would be fair. So I'd rather, either bring someone with more technical expertise in the media in to talk to you about it, or, follow up and do my own research before I just give information that might not be 100% accurate.
Okay.
How resistant to the chlorine is it? I know normally we run a real low number out of that plant, but occasionally it has to be run up. If we have E. coli hits out in the system, he has to run that up high.
Yeah, so our understanding based on discussions with them is that our typical, 0.2 milligrams per liter would be no problem. And that is well above what currently we're seeing. I think it's 0.02, last time I was out there, right, on the
Yeah,
chlorine analyzer.
I've never run up to .2.
Right. So,
So even when you have something hits in the system that you have to increase the chlorine, you're not going up close to that.
I hear from, I hear from somebody, there's somebody right there that does auto repair, I hear from her first. I've been threatened before.
yeah, I guess the other piece of it too is that we are still, going to provide a new pump that's properly sized for adding post-treatment chlorine. So you still have the ability to run just the Myox unique through green sand specific for iron and manganese and achieve your residual in the distribution system after, by dosing after the PFAS treatment. So that flexibility will, still be there even with the adage.
You're not eliminating that just because this thing.
That would be our recommendation.
Would it still take it offline when we backwash? Because backwash then you'd be pulling in from the system. It
So
would be mixed, but.
yeah, so I think we would still recommend having that tank offline during the backwash. But all of the runs, they do to estimate the life of the beds, is based on our flow rate and understanding those downtimes. And they're projecting, similar life. And again, just to make sure we were comparing apples to apples, they're still doing their analysis based on, Q3, where we saw, 20 parts per trillion of PFAS. And as you know, we've been seeing, that closer to 12 parts per trillion the last 2 quarters, right?
Yeah.
So if anything, the estimates, we could see 60 to 80% increase in life. But we wanted to make sure we were comparing apples to apples. So they're using that same influent, and then the same effluent goal less than 10, so that you're not subject to the monthly reporting requirement.
If our number keeps going down, they gotta make us do the treatment?
So I don't know. So that's the honest answer. We are still under the notice of non-compliance at this point, and you've completed everything required of that so far. And this pilot program, which is, to do the media installation and essentially see how it's working for a year, is all in line with that, DEP approval. What we would recommend is, over that period, continuing to monitor the levels, and we think you'd have an opportunity to change, the plan moving forward with DEP at that point. I think it's a conversation we'd have with them as soon as, you know, this goes online, is to say, you know, this is online, we're on target with our compliance plan, just so you're aware, you know, we continue to see the trend in West Bridgewater of, you know, decreasing, or if we see it level off at 12, then I think we have a case to make that we saw, you know, flip at Q3, and, you know, you were proactive, you met all of your obligations, DP, but this seems to be the real number, the real influent concentration, if you will. And I think they would be, we would expect them to be reasonable in, you know, changing maybe the direction. This might, right now we're posing this as a 1-year pilot or demonstration study, but if we have no breakthrough at 50% of the media after a year, we think the reasonable, you know, course of action would be to let it ride, right? You know, and see how long we can get by with that one vessel with this media. And really the proof will be in, you know, that program where we're not just seeing the levels as it comes out the back, you know, we have intermediate tap points. So we'll be able to see when breakthroughs happen before you actually have any breakthrough into the system. So,
Sorry about that.
so I guess all of that,
First,
in,
I'm in a meeting.
so when you take all that into account, we would expect that this would last longer than a year, and that DEP would be, you know, amenable to looking at the approach moving forward.
We'll be having in the concentration samples as part of this, so we'll be, if it is staying low, we'll have a serious amount of time worth of proof of where it's running.
Yeah, we're essentially treating it like a pilot study where, you know, there's a lot of sampling, more than, you know, you would need to do just for your own operation and maintenance of the plant and, you know, distribution system. You know, there's additional data we need to collect for DEP to, you know, sign off on. So at the end of the 1 year, we submit a report to DEP saying this was the results of the 1 year. We would include recommendations, and what we're hopeful is that our recommendation would be the system is working, we have yet to see breakthrough at 50%. We recommend extending, you know, use of this treatment system for another year. Is where we're hoping will be at that time. I think that's a realistic goal based on the influent levels we're seeing right now.
How much more cost effective is the new media that's chlorine resistant?
Yeah, so
I think it was actually cheaper in the long run.
So it's, yeah, we looked at capital costs first, just because that's the monies that have already been, you know, appropriated. And we, you know, we understand that, you know, moving the finish line at this stage of the game is, you know, troublesome. So we first looked just to make sure we weren't asking for any more initial capital investment up front. So essentially, when you kind of take all of it into account, it ends up being about $30,000 cheaper to go with this media. And that doesn't even take into account that you now have a whole chemical that you don't have to supply in perpetuity, you know, to operate the system.
Their effectiveness is.
Yeah, it has Mass
All the
DEP
same?
approval, so that was a big selling point to us to recommend moving forward with it, is that DEP has seen enough data to be comfortable that it works in our application. So we would, with your,
Any towns using it right now?
that's a good question. I'll have to find out what some of the other installs are to provide that information. So the fact that it has DEP approval is a positive.
Yep.
Right. I don't think we would have recommended it if that weren't the case, because then you become, you know, that the test subject, so to speak. So, you know, we do think it's
Somebody must be using DEP
Yeah,
to approve it.
yeah,
That-
it's definitely
Somebody's
been
pilot studied
successful.
it.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere.
Yeah, it might even be in the proposal that's attached. I just didn't want to hold everybody up reading it again. But I'm happy just to follow up with that information in an email.
Yeah,
So
and
I think-
just be interested,
Yeah.
if we did decide to go with it, we could talk to the people that are already using it, get the pros and cons from them. That helps a lot, talk to the operators.
So I'll prepare an email and send it to you guys, just kind of summarizing again how the technology works technically, and then also what installations are operating in Massachusetts already. So anything else on that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and we basically have to wait for DEP to say yes to the change
So
anyway, so.
in our opinion, we don't need to resubmit or amend. I think we would give Jim McLaughlin a call and just make sure he agrees with that assessment. And then essentially we would just notify him that we're moving forward with the program as submitted to DEP and approved by DEP, just with a different Mass DEP approved media. Make sense?
Exactly.
Okay, so the next one is iron and manganese. So, we're not under contract to do anything with that yet, but one thing I talked to Wayne about is there are expected to be grant opportunities this summer, which hopefully will align well with when I think we're scheduled to do some pilot testing this summer after the new fiscal year begins. And manganese has been one of those contaminants we're hearing is of concern. So we're expecting manganese-related projects to score well. So our recommendation would be to, on your behalf, submit, it'd be through the SRF loan program, and we're not entirely sure what that would entail for any sort of
Are
forgiveness.
these loans or grants?
So this would be an SRF loan, which may or may not have a forgiveness component to it. We're keeping an eye out for that information, but we suspect it will be a good program this year with some principal forgiveness, and if manganese really is an item of concern, then this project should score well.
It'd be nice if they could do those loan programs without any interest.
Mm.
I mean, they used to give a lot of grants, then they went to the loans. But when they used to give the grants, they gave away millions of dollars and then it was gone. But if they did the grants, the loans with no interest, they'd be taking the grant money and just financing it for the towns, it would help. It would help a lot.
Interest rates are supposed to be.
And it would go further too.
But when we have the details, we can certainly let you know. I mean, we do those applications as a courtesy, so, and you're not obligated to take it if you get it. So we typically recommend, submitting and seeing if the terms are favorable, see, if it's something that works for you.
We're trying to figure out if you'd be eligible for the principal forgiveness, or is that something they do later on, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the
Feel
big
fine,
piece of it, because, sometimes the SRF paperwork adds engineering costs, or, costs to contractors to, comply with all the provisions of it. So there have been times where, communities have opted not to do the SRF because without any principal forgiveness, they didn't find that it was a worthwhile program.
Right. Yeah,
So
because
that
sometimes they add things in there that they want you to do in the project, it costs you extra money, so it's not worth using their money because they throw things in there that you're gonna spend more money on, and the interest is about the same you get from a bank.
Mm-hmm.
That's, years ago, they had a grant that was coming out, and it was for, they wanted to get everybody metered. And it drove me crazy that the towns that never bought meters and the customers never had any, they just used like a basic charge. All those people got free meters. And I told them, I said, we started putting meters in 1910 when we started the water system, and we bought used meters because we couldn't afford new ones. We bought them from Brockton, and we had been rebuilding them up until the 60s because we couldn't afford new meters, and then we were buying a few new meters, but the new meters, we were actually rebuilding them ourselves and calibrating them all the time. They didn't last very long. They only lasted a few years before you'd have to redo them. And they said, well, at least you have meters. We're not gonna give you a grant. I was like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
We're working hard to be good operators and have meters, and they wouldn't give us any money. And a town that didn't even make the attempt got all the money.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, we see it.
But
Unfortunately,
so when they came out with this revolving fund, I said, well, that's a good idea.
Mhm.
I thought it was gonna be like interest free. You go in there, if you need meters, you'd buy the meters, and they'd finance it with no interest, and then you're getting a good break. But it just doesn't. This plan doesn't work out very well, if you ask me. You gotta be real careful when you get into it.
So I mean, that's part of the, I guess, that's part of the analysis.
Still worth putting the
If you're
application in
selected
and
in-
finding out.
Yeah.
Because if you find out afterwards that it would have been a good deal.
Yeah, or you find out afterwards that they're doing 40% forgiveness this year, then that probably is a worthwhile.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of ties into the rates too. If you want to talk about that next.
Sure.
So, as you might recall from last time when I came, we had just kind of given you the document, so I know no one really had a chance to kind of digest, but just to back up and kind of recontextualize what that was. So, we helped with an asset management grant project that included looking at above ground and below ground assets, and one of the components that's required for that is a rate study. So what we did is we completed kind of a big picture rate study that looks at what the budget was at the time, projected revenue, and what, if any, deficit that might exist. By the time we kind of were finalizing that, was when a lot of the PFAS, kind of hit us, right? We kind of all of a sudden were scrambling because, to deal with the notice of non-compliance. We started looking at iron manganese, so we kind of pivoted the focus away from some of the recommendations that were in the report and towards some of these high priority projects, which were iron manganese and PFAS treatment. So out of that came that document we provided maybe back in March. I don't remember the date.
It was way back,
Yeah. Let's see.
maybe earlier.
I was gonna say it's been a while.
Yeah, it could have been back in February. But anyway, so what it found was that if we don't do anything rates wise, you'll be running a deficit, especially by the time these big capital projects hit. So we kind of got to that point. We came up with one potential structure that could work, knowing that it would take community involvement to find out what that actually would look like. So I didn't know if there's any specific feedback or questions on that analysis you want to go into. If you want me to maybe kind of re-summarize some
You
of
might have
The
to
numbers?
summarize some of what you had up there. because
Sure.
It's been a while since we looked at it.
and a couple things to keep in mind. This was all based on the fiscal year 2020 actual budget, because that's what we had at the time. And the revenue was based on the 2021 revenue. And that's what we kind of projected out. And then we took a look at all of the, the projects that we had planned. Do we still have copies of this? Do you want me to?
No, that's what I was looking around, I know they haven't seen it in a while.
If I unstaple this, could we make copies? Is that
Mhm.
a problem? You'll have to forgive
Yeah,
my
that's staples.
scribblings and highlights, but maybe
No
that'll
problem.
I
help.
have a stapler remover,
Okay,
no
thank you.
problem, sure.
So I'll just kind of summarize the methodology while we're making copies of that, and we'll get into some of the details in front of you. So essentially, we took a look at all of those capital projects that, for iron manganese, and we guessed, or estimated, as the engineer did, right, Fergus?
Yeah.
So we estimated what year design would happen versus construction. We made some assumptions with, Wayne's help to figure out, engineering you'd probably appropriate from your budget, whereas, large construction projects might be bonded over 20 years. And we essentially looked at 20 years of those costs. And that assumes that all other improvements to your system are consistent with your current budgets. So that's not any major, water main or tank projects above and beyond the cleaning and those types of already baked in budget items. And so I think, if I remember correctly, it showed the worst year being 2026 in that time period, where the deficit was between $900,000 and $1 million by then. I think we've all now come to a place where we think that's worst case, based on kind of the favorable results we're seeing with the PFAS, also some of the additional funding that might be available. I think the only funding this assumed was the $350,000 you thought you were going to get for the short-term PFAS, and I think there was an earmark that we thought we were going to get. Thank you. But any other funding you get would improve the picture, so to speak. So I think the first thing we looked at was, okay, if you just did a flat increase, but that was going to be something like a 57% increase. Everyone's bill this essentially goes up, to 150% what they're paying now, with no regard to who's actually using the most water, etc. And so that was kind of the rough look at that's what it would take to get there. So then the next thing we did was like, okay, well, what if we did more, tried to mimic more of like the tier systems that you see elsewhere. We didn't go full tier because we wanted to work within your framework, A, because the scope was somewhat limited to what the asset management grant required, and then just B, we understand that it's, it would be a big undertaking to ask you to redo your entire rate structure to match, other communities. So, working within the framework, you essentially, the year we looked at, which was 2021, about 38% of your revenue came from the base, and then the 62 came from your excess. And so we were trying to not make that worse, because as you know, you typically want to get as much of your revenue out of the base as possible, especially if you're raising rates. You're going to see people kind of constrict their water use, at least in the short term, right? Oh, my bill's going up, I'm going to use less water. That's a natural. Some of that will stick, but a lot of it doesn't. A lot of times people will relax back into their habits. But when you're talking, 150% increase, that might stick more. So these are all things, I guess, before we put any sort of new rates into existence, these are all the things really we have to look at. So one thing we kind of offered in the past is, an informal workshop where I could bring a laptop in, put it up on the screen, and run you through our spreadsheet that kind of runs things, and you can say, okay, what would it look like to get more out of the base? What would it look like to get more out of the excess? But when you get your copy, essentially,
The motion to buy a faster coffee machine. Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Table 6 is the one that I'll talk to once everybody has table 6 in front of them. And I think hopefully you have my notes even, because that might help with the context. You'll see current base is 38%, excess is 62. Those are the numbers I was just refreshing. And then on the top, you'll see where the current rates are. So we have our base quarterly. So those went up what we think was like a manageable level. For example, residential, that went up $20. So $20 per quarter. And then in addition to having a base excess, we looked at having a super excess. So this is where we're using your structure and kind of imitating those tiered structures that are used elsewhere. And what this allows us to do is have those using the most water take on more of the added costs. And so the table 7 kind of shows what the potential impact could be. And again,
So, so the base excess would be, this is for a quarter? Or just, yeah, quarterly, okay, 675 cubic feet?
Yeah.
For the first residential, and then if they exceed 4,000, then
yeah, exactly.
that would be double the rate.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's
So these
everything
people
over
would be
that amount.
using 16,000 cubic feet per.
They'd have to use a lot of water to get to that 4,000.
That's the intent, right?
Yeah,
I don't even think sprinkler systems get them close to that.
Really?
No, and actually, one issue we have, and it's popped up on years we don't pump a lot of water, is we're relying on excess to pay our bills,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed, you know, and that's kind of like, if your bonus check doesn't come, you can't pay. So, I mean, we're going actually almost the wrong way on the base. I mean, if you disagree,
I
No, I'm
speak up. I mean,
actually-
we're going from 38% down to 32%.
Right.
I think we should, if anything, we should be going the other direction.
We would agree.
Yeah, because on the backside of the consumer confidence report that I gave you, there's a little thing about, in big letters there, and the residents not following it, and that's how we generate our revenue. And we've been in a drought now for several months. I'm
Yeah.
driving around town and the people are watering during the middle of the day. I'm like, there's one thing to violate, and then there's another to be flagrant about it.
How,
And if I get called on it, then I'm gonna have to clamp down, and then that's gonna skew our rates badly.
Good catch.
So I guess what we would see as the next steps would be some sorts of, again, informal discussions, because I think there are just so many variables and so many, community-specific concerns that we can't speculate all of them. For example, currently, your rates in this, I'm sure this is not an accident, but are actually perfectly balanced between residential, commercial, industrial, where the percent of the costs of those are being recovered by those users. So that was one thing we saw that, was very, shows that the existing rates, at one point were fixed, using the proper, techniques and concepts to establish rates. I think we've just outgrown them, is what it, and some of that is just everything costs more, and if we're not raising rates every year, then, that it can catch up to you. And then the other thing is, PFAS is just hitting everybody. It's, it's just a burden that nobody anticipated until it was too late. So those are some of the reasons why we're now kind of playing catch up, and that can make it more painful to, kind of get it in place. So I think we would recommend that informal discussion include a review of the budget and make sure that nothing has changed over the last couple fiscal years where we're drastically over or underestimating any of the budget components. And then a kind of a philosophical conversation to figure out, where we want the rates to come from, what can you get past, in an ideal world, everybody sees the need for it and is on board, even if it's, a big price increase. We know that that's not always the case though. So, and exactly what you're talking about in terms of base and excess and super excess, we'd like to get as much out of the base as possible, but we would need your guidance as to how much of a base increase do you think the community can tolerate. And what we, you want to promote conservation, but it also goes kind of against your interests of revenue. So, we understand that there's, a lot of political and, community-specific factors that go into ironing it out. But with a workshop, what we could do is pull it up and say, okay, well, instead of going up $20 a quarter, so you're going to the community and saying it's gonna be an extra $80 a year. What does it look like if you tell them it's gonna go up $200 a year? No matter how much water they use. That's a harder sell, but gets more out of the base and makes it a little bit more, recession-proof, so to speak, if everybody regresses on their water use.
And you have a spreadsheet tool in that you, if we were at
So-
the informal meeting, we could sit down and play with those numbers.
We
and see
can
what
connect the
results
laptop
would be.
up to your screen,
Yeah.
and we can do it in real time. I think that would be a helpful exercise.
I think it'd be helpful for me to see, like, an example of a quarter in town, like how many people fell over the base, how many people by these standards would be in super excess.
Okay.
And what kind of demographics those would be, are they businesses, are they residences, cause if it's businesses in the super excess, that might be more meaningful to understand than if it's,
We're about 80% residential usage.
Yeah,
right, but of the base,
We don't,
how many, what percentage of our 2,654 users?
right, you
Or
can look
above
through the
base.
you can look through the commitment and see where the bell curve is, you can see the curve.
be interested to see how many customers we have would fall into that super excess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Well,
like within each.
That's a good point. That would be worth looking at them and making sure we're not miscategorizing somebody or, making sure that those numbers are accurate, because if we're gonna rely on that usage.
Can you do that with your billing program, bring up everybody that's greater than a certain amount?
Mhm.
Well, that'd be interesting, is then we could, play with the super excess,
Cause then we could.
whether
know
it
that-
should be lower or higher,
And then we could know, like, if 95% of the people exceed the base, if we adjust the base, we know we're adjusting it for more than 95% of the people.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we're permitted for our water use, I know the residents think they run us because they pay us, but we're permitted and I have to run by their rules and regulations. Like most every town right now is very stringent on that back page of that thing, and, we don't follow it, and I'm not the only one that sees the numbers, so they can see the numbers.
I never enforced it because I couldn't afford to.
Right, I understand, but at some point we've now been.
We put the signs up, but, we didn't enforce it just for that reason.
They're
We
just
couldn't
not being
afford to.
smart either,
If that comes to that, it comes to that, but.
I guess
Even
kind of
even
to
more
your
of a
point.
reason we need to push more onto the base, because that's gonna cut down on that excess.
So table 7, kind of outlines what you're saying is where's the biggest impact coming. So you took a look and said under the structure we gave you, which by no means is the final recommended structure, right? You see if you're just a typical, residential unit using your 55 gallons per capita per day, then you would see an increase of your bill about 33%. But your residential units that are using like 500 gallons per capita a day, they're getting the brunt of it at 109. So what would that do to their usage? We don't know. But then you'll see, kind of down the line, 21% for business, 15% for industrial. That's all because we fixed the percentage of revenue from each category to match their percentage of water use. So if we want, if you're trying to shift some of the burden to those users, that would require not fixing that ratio. Does that make sense?
It's not an easy fix.
Residential one with the 500, is that saying gallons per day, they'd use 1,250 gallons per day per person?
Sorry, no. So what we tried to do is cap this, the service type. We just said, okay, this is like like our fact check. In theory, this is how your rate program would work, but what would that mean to this person, right? So the top line is supposed to represent a residential dwelling where they're using 55 gallons per capita day, which is what Massachusetts considers to be the right amount to use if you're doing proper water conservation, right? So the next one down is like, okay, well, what happens if you're using 10 times that much? That's, those are the ones where you see the big jump up where they're paying 109% of the current bill because they're the ones getting caught by the super excess essentially. And then just going down the line, if you're just a single unit
So those people
business.
using lawn sprinklers, you have to use the lawn, automatic lawn irrigation to come anywhere near 500 gallons a day.
Yeah, well, we want to go over those top users with you, see if you know where they are. Like you'll know where they are. To us, they're
I
just
know what they are.
an entry on a spreadsheet to you,
What's the
their
average person
customers.
using now? What are they trying to keep it under? Was it 90 gallons per day? 80?
I can't tell you.
80 or 90 gallons per day, DEP wanted it.
Oh, DEP's down to like 50.
Yeah, I think we're,
I think you're.
calculated it out like.
If you have a Water Management Act, I think 65%,
Right.
65 gallons per day, and 10% unaccounted for water. The two measures they.
Okay, I couldn't remember what the number was.
And I think we were under, I think we were like 54.
Yeah.
So if we get you the information of what our population uses, would you be able to tell us how many, like if we picked a quarter and gave you that information, you'd be able to tell us how many users would fit in this category, how many would fit in this category?
So we
based on
have that data from our study here.
Oh, okay.
That was provided, provided
Oh,
to
okay.
us, and that's what this is based on. So I can tell you in that year already, some of the calculations are already in the spreadsheet. Some would just require me, I could do most of that in like real time.
Right,
If
okay.
you had specific questions or certain scenarios you wanted me to try out, it's.
Best thing that could happen, we won't have to use that FESAF, build any of that. If we could get the numbers down lower, and DEP will let us off the hook. We can keep the numbers low, these numbers are low.
Well, at the minimum, you might have to put in a redundant filter, so you're still gonna have to do something there.
Yeah, I think exactly. At some point, to call that a permanent alteration, they require some sort of redundancy. The exception would be if you were, under the 10 coming in, then you might be able to get away from not doing redundant technology.
Right. We're down to 14?
I tested the raw, so one well was 11 point something and the other one was 14 point something, so we're blending at this point.
And that's what
But if
results
one
in-
is at 11,
But
then
that's
the other
only
one's
on
right
mid-
there.
That's only on Manley Street, right?
Right.
These are even lower.
So, yeah, they're low, but they've increased by like a point, I think, over the year.
They have.
Yeah.
And the chances are, DEP's, they're going to increase what they're gonna be
Right.
controlling on PFAS too. I mean,
But no matter what, if you're gonna
already
build
know
a
that.
plant here, then you're gonna build it to treat for PFAS anyways, cause it's out there. And we're a Title V system, I mean, that's what I said at town meeting, we're putting it in the water. So we're actually hurting ourselves, it's not. We just don't need the big exceptions when they use firefighting foam and stuff like that. We don't have any huge industry that's discharging.
What we need to do is stop using stuff.
Yeah, well,
It's
it's
in
in
country
everything.
to stop using it.
Well,
It's
if
not
we
gonna
start
happen.
taking it out, so we're putting less of it into the system in the drinking water, or it goes through their Title V systems, there'll be less going, because already you're gonna be carrying over less, because we
What
are,
we need to do is
so
design
we're just
PFAS
recycling it.
Title V systems. But yeah, I mean, it's out there, but I mean, if they build a plant here, that you're gonna build it so you have the ability to treat for PFAS.
Yeah.
So if it does come up, at least you're there, cause once you're above 10, you're sampling monthly. Those samples it's costing more and more now, I think I'm up like $5.50 a sample.
So I guess the one thing I do want to add is that in terms of the rate study, we have two different endpoints. So the first one is obvious, right? You get to a point where you feel like you have a rate structure you can roll out and get approval for. But the other one is to be able to close out the asset management grant and get the second half of your reimbursement. So for that, our opinion is to just take this to a point where you feel like it's accurate, represents your overall plan, and then let that be finalized, submit to DEP the whole asset management grant with this piece in it, close that, get reimbursement for that, and then continue to work towards implementation.
So we're not putting that in, we don't have anything to do with the grant that ties us into actually setting the rates to that.
Correct.
So we can still tweak it afterwards, all right?
Yeah, because everything's fluid, we don't know what the cost actually will be.
Exactly. So, and it is a snapshot in time going into the report, whereas, you know, this is all real. So they're a little different. So for this report, we probably wouldn't recommend changing the budget, updating the budget to this year. I think that's something we should do. But in terms of closing out the, asset management grant,
Keep it where it is.
make sure that this represents your philosophy. It's accurate as of the time we did it, to the best of your knowledge, and indicates where you want to go. And then once we have kind of agreement on what that is, finalize it, submit it, we'll get a reimbursement in so you can get reimbursed for the cost of it. And then obviously we'll continue to work with you in any capacity you need with the rate study stuff, to get to a point where you feel like you have something actionable.
It is, unfortunately, what it is, and it's gonna cost money to build the plant, and they're not cheaper anymore. Nor have they ever been. All we can do is hope that we get one of the principal forgiveness programs, or a chunk of it, and that would actually defray it.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, we're gonna have to work towards a rate that figures in a lot of water conservation and not what's being used. We're permitted, we're supposed to run by the permit, what they tell us to do.
Before we set a rate like this, do you think we should have like a meeting where we have like a public hearing to discuss all this?
I think we want to have the informal meeting that he's talking about
First,
to
yes.
go over all this stuff and figure out, when we start playing with this and that, what if we do this, what if we do? I don't know if we're all here, it'd still have to be a posted meeting, but rather than, come up with that stuff and then do a public hearing on maybe like the last one or two options, we can, when we get closer.
I think I just think
Process.
maybe if we explain things and people have their input, they'll see how difficult it is to try to pay the bills and come up with a fair rate. Where you gotta charge different people different amounts, so. I think that they'll leave the meeting with a better understanding rather than just getting it dumped on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'd be a
Yeah,
good strategy.
But when, again, just as long as we have our ducks in a row,
Right.
a bit better
Right,
first.
right, that's what I'm
Because there's a
saying.
lot to go on here.
Sometimes like at town meetings, I always found that, sometimes you get upset with the, town meeting suggestions, but a lot of times you can walk away with, after somebody's criticized something, yeah, they were right, they have a good point, and you can work around what their idea was to come up with a better idea. They just come up with good thoughts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes what we learn from that is that, what we think we're communicating isn't what they were hearing, right? So sometimes those, situations, it's just, those questions allow us to reframe how we're presenting things. So, There's
And when they
70.
see the numbers and you see the projected costs and what's happening, I mean, it has to be paid for, and I know they understand that, because they pay for a school, they understood that that was $60-something
Right.
million.
Yeah. And then I think the other one on the agenda was the tank. And so, I know that'll be on our radar so that when we kick over to the new fiscal year, you know, we can communicate the timing of us completing that work. So that's on our radar as well.
So have you started to work on that at all? Or?
No, we have not.
Okay.
So
I
when
think,
that eventually comes online, I prefer that happen in like the springtime, because I really feel it's gonna change the dynamics of our system, because now you're forcing water to a point it's never had to have that force to go to, so I think we're gonna go through a period of leaks that are gonna pop up.
If we get some leaks, we'll probably get some dirty water in places you
Yeah,
haven't gotten
right.
it before.
Water will be flowing different directions.
Yeah.
And I'm worried more about the leaks, because if the system is dynamic, it's static, as long as nobody messes with it, and that's gonna mess with it big time, it's not. The last time we had it messed with was when they were building the high school and they were using the hydrants for dust control, and we had the illegal landscaper running around using it too. And we had pipes popping all over the place, and I had a lot of dirty water. I suffered for like 2 years, people screaming at me about dirty water because what was happening. And I couldn't control it because the system wasn't static anymore.
And we might
I still would like to look at the Crescent Street 16-inch water main that goes up Manley Street and make sure we don't have any gates off.
I think we did test that.
You did?
Yeah.
Did you open the hydrant down on Manley?
Yeah, we actually
and
ran the
West?
16 all the way out of the tank, because it was part of my thing. We found a gate closed somewhere, and one of my things for, it was, I'm trying to think what happens when I fail the bacteria itself.
We
I
had
to do a report, and it was one of my things. We chased the 16 all the way up and out, all the way to Crescent,
The
all the
first-
way up to West Street.
the first gate on Spring Street coming out of the tank. That's a reverse gate, and that was closed.
Yeah,
We
we
thought it
closed.
was open and it
We
was
opened and
closed.
closed gates so that we could test each position, and we ran it, the 16 all
You
the way
closed
up
off
to
all
West
the
Street.
branches to the 16 all the
Yep.
way up.
Yep.
That's how we did it. We shut them all off, and we knew that at the end, when we shut the main off, that when we turned that hydrant on,
Yeah, it was
that
level
we
to
were
assess.
gonna
That's it.
see that should have been right from the bottom of the tank, 16-inch right to that hydrant. It should have been buku water. That's, years ago, when you turned that hydrant on, it was scary. The ground would shake. It would give you so much water going through the steamer. And we turned it on and nothing came out.
Yeah, that was part of my level 2 assessment. We chased the 6 and the 16 all the way up to West Street.
So we started looking at our gates going backwards, and the last one we checked coming out of the tank, it was shut off.
But when you're doing the work for Walnut Street, you've got some computer modeling you're doing associated with that.
Yep.
So you'll be able to at least give an idea of what the rise in pressure is gonna be when that valve shuts.
exactly. Yeah.
So we'll have an idea, you know, where you should be seeing issues with the pressures, where you might be getting stuff popping. And if we have everything on VFDs now, maybe can we set something in the controls when those valves close at Spring Street tanks, that we run the VFDs down, so we're not pushing quite as much water, because that'll lower the pressure too.
Yeah.
So there's ways we might be able to control that, so it won't be as bad,
Yeah.
and you've got the model
Mhm.
to do that with, so.
Yeah, as you take the head pressure off the pumps, they'll pump out more water. So you gotta slow them down with
Hey, just take the VFD and bring it down.
yeah,
so you're
that's
not
what I mean.
pushing
Yeah,
it.
ramp it down.
I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not looking forward to it.
Okay. So you all set?
I think so. I mean,
So you want us to get back to you with maybe a couple of options on when to do the
Yeah,
informal?
I'd like to bring Jenna Raza. You've met her a few times. She's done countless rate studies, and so I think it'd be good to have her there too, just because she has a lot of understanding of what other communities have done, as a reference point as well.
She can tell us how to wear our shields for the pitchforks and torches.
I don't know if anyone can help you with that. Yeah, so you just let us know the dates, and I'll coordinate with her, and like I said, we can come down and play with spreadsheets.
So we don't need to do anything, they don't have to take a vote for where you're looking at the other media, correct?
In our opinion, what we're doing is
That's why-
consistent with everything.
You're doing what the study's supposed to be.
Yeah, we just as we do with any design, once you get into design, you get into the details and you do your due diligence and your value engineering and make sure that what we're doing is what makes sense.
Yeah.
That's all, in our opinion, all this is.
Because I think I had told her that I didn't, without a doubt, I think we'd prefer to go with the other media.
Yeah.
I really feared melting the IX media.
Yes, you're right, you walk that razor edge and.
Yeah, that's a really bad thing.
No, especially if all it takes is one hiccup and you blow
Yeah.
everything up, and now you don't know how long it'll take to replace it, never mind the cost.
Yeah.
So, and it's cheaper besides,
Right.
so, win-win.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a real dangerous system.
Well,
Right,
you
well,
know, either that, or you run a whole dechlor system, and then,
That's where our recommendation
Finish
is kind of
scoring.
gonna come in otherwise, it's just like to make this capital investment and to not protect it with a chemical, feed
Right.
system, was, probably not recommended.
but then that's a whole nother cost, whole
And you
nother
gotta-
thing for the operators to deal
And
with,
then
something
we have
else.
to figure out where we can put it where it's,
Yeah.
safe and has containment and then to eat your, we don't ever like to recommend eating your contingency during design, right? That's there for when things go wrong in construction, so it's always something we're, trying to be cognizant of as well.
Oh.
So, I think this is, so we'll,
That's good news.
Yeah.
Basically.
we believe so. So we're, like I said, we'll call Jim, just make sure he agrees that there's no paperwork needed, and then we'll let you guys know either way.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very much for coming in.
on the next round of funding for the maintenance too.
Yeah, he's very, by the book, but he's fair and he knows what he's talking about. He's a good ally.
Do we need to take a vote for you to apply for those SRF?
They're not out yet. We'll let you know when they're out. I think they're typically due in August, I think is what we're expecting.
something like
Okay.
that.
But yeah, we can look at the details and, we can let you know at that time. And if right off, if there's anything that jumps out that you don't want us to do it, then, we won't, but.
Yeah, but it's usually the idea that it's better off, you might as well apply, because
Right.
you get it and you don't have to take it if you find a better deal, but at least
Right.
that way, you're not, you don't wanna look back afterward and say, gee, we could've gotten that, and they got half the principal they forgiven,
Yeah.
Right,
or something like that, I mean.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and we're not asking you to appropriate any money for it, like I said, it's, we do it as a courtesy.
Yeah.
Alright, well, thank you.
All right, thank
Appreciate
you
your
very
time.
much for coming in.
Alright.
Wayne, you heard anything about Lincoln Street warehouse?
I haven't heard a peep.
Okay. Has anybody else heard anything on that?
I've had people asking if I know what's going on over there, and everybody, I haven't heard anybody say they knew what was going on.
How about Ross Messina's project there?
That's gone silent too.
That's silent. Capital town meeting's over, we don't have to talk about
No, that
that.
can come off, that's,
And water rates, we already
yeah,
talked that to death. And anything on solar grants or anything come up around?
not yet.
No.
I have to look.
I think you're gonna see, I was just reading an article that President's stepping in, trying to get some of these big, projects that have been sitting dead. I guess they put an embargo on the ones coming from China, because China was selling them to South Korea or something.
Right, they're
And then they were
reloading into-
making a big circle around, they were coming in. but they were government funded by China, and the prices were really cheap, and United States companies couldn't compete against them because Chinese were financing the
Right.
manufacturing them, but he's stepping into a lot of big projects, I guess, solar projects are
He
put
wants
on
to-
hold because they can't get the panels.
Right, he wants it manufactured here now.
So, yeah, he's trying to get them going here, but, where they held them all up from overseas and their prices are so much lower, that's like killed everything. So, but they're doing something about it right now to get these projects moving. I don't know what it is, but you might see some action there.
Yeah, the prices on all of them are gonna go up. That's what's, the action you're gonna see is that all the solar projects are gonna get more expensive, because the reason China was sending it through Korea was because we put the tariffs on it,
Right.
anything coming from China. So to keep the cost down and sell more, they send it through the other places. So they're just gonna keep making that more expensive until we can make it at the same price here
Right.
and actually use it. Or they'll have to subsidize it out of the federal budget if you buy the, panels. But I think I don't think we even have all the components. I think we still have to go overseas to get the components to be able to make the panels.
I worked at a company for 28 and a half years that developed photovoltaics, and they thought it was worthless and sold it off. And look at today, and that company's gone now.
I don't know, I'm just amazed that those panels can produce as much electricity as they do.
Yeah.
Totally amazes me.
Well, mine's not any good because the inverter burnt out, and they haven't been able to configure the new one to the existing system.
Really?
And somehow they're not calling me back anymore either, which is beginning to.
Your system just too old for the new equipment?
No, it's like 4 years old, so it's not.
Oh, that's not old.
No, it's.
Huh.
I'd have to call Channel 7 and say, help me, Hank.
Sometimes it gets that time, you have to.
Yeah.
A lot of times, the regular electrician can figure these things out. Dave Thompson, I know, he installed his own, and
Yeah, they're
a
not,
local electrician wired the whole thing up. It works beautiful.
right. They're not difficult. You can buy the kits and do them yourself.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to wire one up because I don't know anything about electricity. Has anybody got anything else that can be brought up at the meeting here that,
I gave you the CCR,
yeah,
and I've already
you
pointed
know
out that.
what he's talking about here, this consumer report we have to put out every year?
Yeah, I was looking it over.
Every town has to do it.
Oh, okay.
And what we have to do is we have to tell everybody what we found in the water and the maximum, we have to tell them what the maximum level that we can have and what our maximum level that we found and what well it was in. So we don't have to tell them all the chemicals if they're not in the water, but anything that was of,
Anything I tested for in the current year, I have to tell them.
yeah,
Just
The
going up,
range and the high and the low.
just going up with the bills or just on the website?
No, it's going up on the website, and then a letter will be sent out to all billable
I actually
addresses.
put the postage, you guys signed up on the $1,500 postage today.
Because I have to certify it has to be.
When you
in
mail
hand
these?
By July 1.
Yep. Well, I don't, I called them.
I thought they went out now electronically.
But you still have to tell them, if you're a huge system, then there are other ways you can do it, but because of our size system, I have to mail it to them and tell them where to look for the link.
Yeah, you don't mail them the report,
No,
you
I'm
just
not
mail
mailing
them.
Oh, you don't mail these?
Yeah.
No, I'm mailing them a one-page letter that says where to go find the link.
I see, okay. That makes more sense. Because not everybody's gonna look at it, but the people who are interested we'll be able to find it and see it.
We'll probably have more people looking for it than usual because of all the stuff that went on over the PFAS this year.
Right. Is that in here?
Everything's in there that I tested for.
Everything.
It's the last item.
Page 8,
Page 8.
which now,
That's the only
which
one.
like all the rest of this stuff, it would be nice if we could say, but now it's lower. Because
Right.
that makes it look bad when you look at the,
Right.
all it has is the single highest result. You know, when in reality,
Right.
mostly we're below and we're back below again.
Right.
But there's
I mean,
not,
I can't send out a letter that says, oh, we're now under it safe, and then the next month I'm over again. That's not how you do it.
no, but I mean, even then, just once you notice that it's starting to stay below, you
Right.
could send out a little bit of a confidence letter that says, you
Yeah.
know, we're working on it, but things are looking better anyway.
Right.
Was there anything else in here that we were in violation of?
Yes.
Huh?
It's secondaries.
Oh, the secondaries, but they're not regulated.
They're not regulated, but,
The sodium.
well, sodium is one, and that's, once again, we do it to ourselves. That's the road salt. It's not just the town, the state does it too.
Right.
And then the manganese,
Yeah.
and I believe we exceed
But that's
iron too.
always, but they're looking at that, they've been looking at it for years, that they were gonna start regulating that, but they haven't yet.
Right. They
And
know,
New England's loaded with it, so.
right, they're looking at alternatives to try to get away from the salt, but
Yeah.
as our cars begin to get eaten up again,
I don't know, and the salt is doing a number on mine.
Yeah.
We have the nice cleanest roads out of any of the towns around after a storm, but.
yeah,
They had
Everything
doctors come to
white.
to
Right.
speak to the water groups at different times about the salt. And they said until people throw away their salt shakers, I wouldn't even think about water, the amount of salt that there is in water. Doesn't make any sense. Sodas and everything else that they drink have a lot more in it.
so you can see by the chart, we're beginning to escalate in our water usage.
Going up a bit now that it's been so hot and dry.
Yeah.
What are you up to now?
So our biggest so far was 1.14.
1.14?
1.14
Yeah,
million.
1.4.
Huh,
Is that on the 10th?
that's a pretty good
Yeah.
sized day.
Oh, no, it's the
30th. 5th. So we've had 4 million-gallon days.
How are the wells doing?
So far they're doing good. We're replenishing. We're gonna get some rain, so,
When?
Wednesday.
Tuesday night into Wednesday, so I think it looks like Wednesday and then Thursday will be somewhat drizzly, I think.
Oh.
But we haven't seen the wells dropping to,
No. So, the dotted line is the year we didn't make revenue. So, as you can see, we're currently running, it drops off because I don't have data for June, but we're running above the dotted line. So as long as we're above the dotted line, we're making budget.
Oh, the dotted line's the year we didn't make it?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Which to me is, it's a good gauge to know when we're.
when it looks like we might be getting close.
Right.
As long as our meters are reading right.
Yeah, they're.
The master meter we know is reading right, as long as the customers' meters are reading right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second,
Oh.
way up under new
Next.
business, Wayne had put up a job posting for a part-time.
So I thought about maybe Peter retired, but if we could get him back, if he still holds his truck driver's license, to use him as a man, and maybe he'll mow lawns, but as a man in the truck to just drive trucks if we have any issues.
Who's this?
Peter Larson.
Oh, okay. He retired?
Yeah. He
Okay.
couldn't take the pace anymore. But I could use him in a lesser out We had another candidate, but we would all had to recuse ourselves except for Art and Dylan. And he was kind of wafflish, but would have been a good hire.
Does he have interest in part-time?
And, well, he was doing it part-time for another town. It's Kerry's father,
Okay.
who was a superintendent for umpteen years. And he works part-time for Bridgewater right now. But I don't think he kind of,
He didn't wanna,
I don't think he wants to leave there.
he doesn't wanna leave a bad taste in anyone's mouth. He's had, you know, he was the superintendent for 38
He'd
years.
be a great guy for around here.
I know, but you can't.
I have known Joe,
Well, like you said,
40
you all have
years.
to recuse yourselves and,
Yeah, but
He
he
still works
doesn't,
part-time and he doesn't, you know, he would hate to just leave that town that he dedicated his whole career
Yeah.
to just, you know, he doesn't wanna do that either.
do you think our guy will work part-time?
yeah, I think he would, cause he went out sooner than he wanted to. So, I think I could get him, but by the time we hire him, it might be summer over anyway, so I'm not sure it's even worth the effort. Cause it takes another meeting, then the selectmen have to meet on it, and so now you're almost a month later.
I would keep Kerry in line.
No, yeah. I mean, you wanna ask him if he'd be interested?
I'll ask him, and then I'll
If it
see.
is, we can decide next meeting and try to get, when does the selectmen meet?
They usually meet right behind us, I think.
So maybe we could get, if he is interested, ask them to stick it
Is he-
on their agenda after our next meeting.
Does he put many hours in for Bridgewater right now, or?
Oh, well, no, her
that's
father,
her
he
father.
won't come.
They won't?
I'm talking about our guy that retired.
Peter.
Peter, oh, you're talking about Peter. Yeah,
He's good.
Peter's a good guy.
Yeah, so I mean, if we ask the selectmen to put it on their agenda, that way they have plenty of time. If
Right.
he's interested, I mean, I don't think any of us have a problem. We can't actually vote on it tonight.
Right.
But,
And it would be up to him to call the pension board and ask how many hours he can actually work.
yeah, but I mean, if he
can
finds
work
out,
up to 19 hours, I believe, that's how it
Is
works.
that it?
How many?
So it's-
19, can't work
19.
more than 20.
Your father must have exceeded that just on one day alone.
He was
Each
allowed
week.
to during COVID, he could work
Yeah.
full-time, so we did. He's back.
Even 19 hours is good if we put it in the middle of the day.
you said just have him drive the truck and,
Yeah.
Are you getting any play on the job posting as
I- I'm gonna have to go out and look and maybe massage it a little to see if I can't turn interest, but yeah, the people I'm getting aren't. Even the last one, the guy has jumped from place to place, like every year he was in a new place, I'm like,
This is what we need.
and he was just hired by a town and he's already looking. So that doesn't bode well.
haven't run across anybody working for another town with good qualifications that's looking for another opportunity.
I haven't, the only one, and he went private and getting him back. I don't think he will come back, but he went out private instead. I'm like, that's a shame, because was a good guy.
A lot more money.
Yeah, if you get prevailing rate, you're like triple what we're paid.
Yeah, the biggest thing we had going for us was a retirement. Is when you're in the private sector, there aren't too many with retirements anymore. You have to put it away yourself. If you're a young guy, it works out great because you have a lot of years to put it away.
Right.
As you get along in your years, you can't do it.
Yeah, they just automatically take it from you, but given your own free will, you won't automatically put that much money away.
So our next meeting is actually gonna be on Tuesday, June 21st, because the 20th is a holiday now.
So the 21st.
Yep.
So that's a Tuesday?
Yeah.
And what's the holiday?
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth,
Yeah. Is that the actual name of it?
yeah,
Yeah. It's on the 19th.
it's on the 19th.
Yeah, so they have,
So
For the day off has to be the 20th.
Yep.
If the state was gonna make a new holiday, they were gonna get a day off for it. Actually, is that just state or is that federal too?
I think it's federal.
Is that
actually.
federal?
Yeah.
So I can't just give our legislature a hard time for wanting an extra day off.
Well, anything else, somebody wants to bring up?
No.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?